If there were a civil war, do you think that you would want help in trying to become educated again? Well, that's exactly what Susie McGill did from the Rwandan Girls Initiative right here based in the Puget Sound. I'm Stan Emmert. Welcome to Rainmakers. Susie, I've been so excited because I've been wanting to interview you about this incredible project for quite some time.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
All right. So why is it that you would think that you could go to a country thousands of miles away that had been through a very, very horrendous civil war, if there are such things as good civil wars, and then help them become educated?
Well, I think backing up a little bit, my partner in this project, Shal Foster, and we started out really in the Puget Sound area. We started out doing projects here in the local community with all sorts of different wonderful organizations. And I think from our own experience of watching our kids have the opportunity to thrive in the incredible schools that we have here and the opportunities that they have, we just started really thinking about what's going on globally and how can we maybe take what we've learned here and apply it globally. And I think the education piece for us became a natural as we started again looking at our own children and then thinking about, well, what's really the foundation for everything else that goes on when you look in the developing world? What's the key thing that can happen to turn a country around is having an educated population that can build their own capacity and all sorts of things, doctors and lawyers and teachers, all those important things. And so honestly, we'd never done anything like this before. We're not experts in this area, never have claimed to be, but really thought, where can we add value? We know about pulling people together around a project, hopefully raising funds for a project that we feel is important and worthwhile. And really first started looking at sub-Saharan Africa. That was the key. There's, the majority of kids that are out of school, when you look globally, are in sub-Saharan Africa. And
had you and Shal ever been there before?
I'd only been actually to Northern Africa. I'd never been to sub-Saharan Africa before. So we initially took a trip to South Africa and really began the process of research of it was a kernel of an idea at that time. And
when was this?
This was in March of 2007 when we first went to South Africa and thought about, is there something that we could do in very small scale? Could we support a school with a technology lab or do something like that? And then we started to realize that we really needed to be thoughtful about where we, especially being naive at the first time doing something like this, that we needed to be really thoughtful about where we focused our efforts first. And that was when we began the process of looking, okay, where in sub-Saharan Africa makes the most sense for us to start. And I ended up in Rwanda on a completely separate visit with my family, actually on more of a business trip. We went looking at the coffee farms, and I was so just completely blown away by this country that before I went the first time, what I knew, which I think is somewhat typical of a lot of people, what I knew was really the genocide. I knew the history of the genocide from the little bit that I'd seen in the news and movies and what have you, and I was really, really quite astounded and moved by what I saw. And at that point, it had been only 14 years since the genocide. And what you got a sense of was this country that, yes, had been through this horrific, terrible genocide and horrible, literally coming back from the ashes sort of feeling. But at the same time, the people there are so committed to their country and so focused on how can we all work together? How can we build our country back to be the best that it can be and not be defined by the genocide. We don't want that to define us.
Even the ones who were so violent against each other had...
Well, what is remarkable that you see there is some of the reconciliation. Now, I think it's naive to think that there's not still undercurrents of things in the country, and it's now been 17 years since the genocide, and which is really such a short time when you think about it.
Yeah.
And the whole scope, I guess, of history. But
we're 155, 160 years away from the Civil War here in the United States, and people still have memories.
Exactly. And so there's a freshness to it in that way because it hasn't been that long. But at the same time, you really, again, your breath is taken away by people coming together and working together to almost in a survival mode, realizing if we don't work together, and again, not everyone, but the majority of people, you get that sense, if we don't work together, then none of us are going to survive and none of us are going to thrive.
And as a mom, you knew that education was so hugely important for
Right.
the stability and the long-term growth for a country. But how was it that Rwanda came to you and Shal and said, okay, we're going to start a school here?
Right. Well, I think at that point, that's when I went back after that initial trip, and I went back to Shal because, again, that wasn't the purpose of that visit anyways, and I went back and said, you know, I think this might be where we need to really dive in and do some research and see if this is the place for us to start. And, you know, honestly, knowing that there's so many reasons for a project like this to fail, that how can we eliminate as many as possible of those? And when you look at Rwanda, and again, it's not perfect, but when you look at things like the corruption rates and the transparency of the government and their desire to be, you know, cooperate and have outside people come in and help stand with them to build their infrastructure, their desire to not be reliant on more and more aid. They're trying to cut back their aid, their development aid, and which I take as all really positive, wonderful things. And so it makes you feel like, wow, you know, this is a country and a government and people that we could really partner with and maybe do something wonderful. So that was really what led us to start diving in and looking. So Shal and I went back in May of 2008 and on what we call our listening tour, but we went and honestly tried to talk to and listen to as many people as possible to say, what's the need? Where can we add value? And we've always had the feeling that we're guests in Rwanda, and you know, we're not coming in with, you know, some big idea.
So what was the answers? What was the need, and where could you add value?
So pretty clearly, again, I would say when we first went in, we were thinking maybe primary school, and pretty clearly what we heard back at that point was that secondary school was the biggest need, and please for girls. I mean, that was really the two things, the key thing.
Who was telling you that?
We met with the Ministry of Education. We met
Man or woman?
With a woman at the time, although currently a man, but at the time it was a woman. Which is another interesting point about Rwanda when you ask about one of the things that drew us to it. One of the things that I didn't know when I first went is that Rwanda has the world's first female majority parliament, which I think is a wonderful and amazing fact when you think about it. Again, this teeny tiny country in Africa that's been through so much, and here they have the, you know, world's first female majority parliament is quite extraordinary. And I think, again, when we looked at things in the country as chances for success, as we started narrowing in on the girl piece, when they started saying to us what we're looking at with the Millennium Development Goals, as many people know, the focus is on universal primary school. So a lot of countries have done pretty well with getting, there's quite a number that are still struggling, and I know there's concerns about whether they'll get there in 2015, but many countries, Rwanda being one, has gotten pretty close to all kids in primary, and gender parity actually in primary as well. But where you see this huge drop-off in, again, most developing countries is in secondary school for both boys and girls, but particularly for the girls.
Why do you think that is, particularly in Rwanda?
Well, I mean, I'll speak more generally because I think it is a more general challenge for adolescent girls. And again, this is, you know, I'm not an expert in all these things. We really learned this from all the evidence that's out there now, and fortunately there's so much good evidence coming out and research coming out about what's going on with girls' education. But what happens with adolescent girls, you know, even if you have them through primary school, at adolescence, all of a sudden you have this drop-off, and they sort of, you know, can fall into this hole of all sorts of things that can pull them down. Quite often they get married too young. If the family has enough money to send one child to school, if secondary school isn't covered, they'll send the boy because traditionally that's just been the way that it is. The family might see that as a better investment long-term, not understanding the investment in the girl will actually pay off more, as we're starting to see from all this research. But and so, you know, things like just puberty. When a girl goes through puberty, the challenges that come from going through puberty, and all of a sudden you're at a school that doesn't have either functioning bathrooms or they don't have separate bathrooms. So puberty becomes a huge issue. If there's, you know, challenges at home, sick family members, younger siblings, it's always the girls that are pulled out first to stay home and care for, you know, the sick family member or the other siblings, again, with the value being placed on the boys staying in.
So, great idea. Sounds like a great opportunity with a lot of cooperation there locally. But let's fast forward. Let's go to from the germination of the idea, the research that you did, to it actually happening.
Yeah.
What'd you do next?
Well, so as all things tend to do, they snowball. So from what started as the little kernel, as we say, of an idea became, okay, well, we just need to build a school, because that's clearly what the need was. There were not enough facilities, physically not enough facilities for kids to even go to school. So everything snowballs.
And actually on your website that we're going to get up several times throughout the show, and we probably already have had it up, RwandanGirlsInitiative.org, there's a site plan on there too.
There is a site plan, and we were really lucky. There's an international architecture firm called Mulvaney G2 that's here in the Seattle area that agreed to help us pro bono with coming up with our plans and worked with us through the whole process, working with our Rwandan architect as well to make sure that everything made sense locally and culturally and all of that there. So we ended up with a beautiful, beautiful plan that we feel like really gives the girls a wonderful space, an inspiring space to learn. But yes, so it became a whole school. From maybe we'll send some, technology equipment to a whole school, and then evolved from that to, okay, how do you have this school really sustain itself?
Yeah. So when did you move there to make this all happen?
Well, to really start the project, or?
I'm kidding. You didn't move there, did you?
To Rwanda. Oh no. So I have.
Because forgive me, you don't look Rwandan.
I have 3 children and Shal has 4, and so no, we live in Seattle, but do take about 3 or 4 trips over each year that we've been working on this for the last 3+ years now. And it's been definitely a full-time job here that I don't think either one of us anticipated, but of course we're really passionate about and excited about doing. So the sustainability piece for us became the next critical piece, because going back to Rwanda's vision for themselves, this, they don't see themselves as wanting to be dependent on continual outside aid. We didn't feel like it was a good plan for us or for them to have something that couldn't be sustained, or at least operating, somewhat independently. So the plan has always been for, turning the school over, how and when to turn the school over, and how can we make that happen. So we started looking at are there ways to generate income around the property? We have about.
So did you have property, or?
We bought property, so we had to buy the property there. The government gave us a couple of hectares of land, and we bought more hectares of land so that we could accommodate the school buildings and the agricultural land that we wanted to be able to hopefully generate some income, and began from there. So started.
You have on-the-ground partners, though, right?
We have on-the-ground partners. We actually have an NGO in Rwanda that also was started, so Rwanda Girls Initiative in Rwanda, and then we work with the local, both the national government in Rwanda and the local government there in Gashora, which is the actual sector where our school is, that we work closely with.
Right. So, great idea. You're well on the way to making this happen. What were the roadblocks along the way?
Well, as you can imagine, there's always interesting roadblocks, especially given that we've never done this before, as I've mentioned.
Were there people locally who didn't want you to come in and build the school?
No, we really didn't have any resistance, I will say. I think locally, the biggest challenges that we had locally, honestly, were more of a capacity building issue, and just the fact that, you have a country where half of the population is under 18 years old because of the genocide. You had, a huge percentage of the population that was killed, particularly educated people in the country, and so they have an issue of capacity and people that are qualified to do certain jobs. So there were times when, things would come up and we're trying to move things along, and they just don't have someone in that position that maybe can get it done as quickly as we would like, or bureaucratic things that you try.
A lot of people talk about in developing countries, they're typically male-dominated, and male dominance doesn't necessarily want girls to become educated.
Right.
Did you find that in Rwanda?
So the interesting thing about Rwanda is at the highest level, as I mentioned with the parliament, at the highest level you have this very, very strong feeling of women empowerment. And from the president down, and President Kagame has said in things that times that I've heard him speak, he said, you know, if 50% of our population is not engaged in the economy, then we'll never reach our development goals. And he's very clear about that. And so they have, through all the areas, all the different ministries, they have girl pieces and gender pieces woven into that. Now there's a delta between that, what happens at that highest level and conversations at the highest level, and women in leadership, because they are there, and what happens at the rural level. So I think the biggest challenge for Rwanda right now is actually translating that down. So there is still discrimination against girls on the rural level, particularly the further out you go in the more rural areas. I think, you know, probably in any developing country, you know, the poorer the girl, the further away from the city, all of those things are extra roadblocks to her and her success.
Now, there are a lot of girls that live right there near the school, or do they actually live at the school?
They live at the school. It's a boarding school, and so we do have a number of the girls from the local community, but what's typical in Rwanda for secondary school, at least at this time, maybe it will change in the future when they have more facilities and more schools, but right now it's very typical to go to boarding school.
Yeah, so I kind of jumped ahead. So when did you break ground, and then let's talk about opening day.
So yeah, so we broke ground in, well, we first broke ground on a community center, which back to the sustainability piece. One of the pieces, we kind of have a few pieces of sustainability that we think about, but one of the important pieces for us is partnership with the local community. And everyone that we talk to that's done any sort of work and development that we listen to very closely, trying to learn from, said, if you want to have a sense of ownership on the ground, you need to, from the beginning, make sure that the people there feel a sense of ownership and they feel part of the process. So we started with building a community center first that we opened up in May of 2010, and with a wonderful celebration, and began classes there, English classes for local people in the community. We'll have agricultural classes there, female reproduction classes, all sorts of things that can go on there to support the community and invite them in. They use the space for all sorts of things, which is wonderful. And then began construction right away on the school buildings. And then the school opened, they work on a calendar year, so it opened at the beginning of February of this year, 2011.
So the school was opened, and you were there, right?
Yes, and we were there for the opening, which was really incredible and exciting to be. And you know, I think for both Shal and myself to stand there after coming, you know, visiting the property with just bushes and shrubs and nothing on it in the middle of, you know, nowhere, and then standing there and seeing this campus, and our first class of 90 girls. We're an upper secondary school, so we have basically the equivalent here of 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. So we started with our first class of 10th graders, so 90 girls in the first class, and to see them there at the opening and sitting up there on the stage and, you know, just beaming with pride at being students at the school was a feeling that's hard to describe, but certainly made a lot of the bumps worthwhile.
Let's talk about some of the girls.
Yes.
Did you ever have the opportunity to talk with some of the parents of the girls, or particularly the moms who were talked to you about the opportunity for their daughters to get educations that maybe they didn't get?
You know, that's very true for many of the girls there. We did talk to some of the parents on that opening day. There was a lot of action going on, as you can imagine, but we did have a chance to talk to some, and then we actually had one student that ended up having a pretty serious medical condition who had to come to the United States for some medical treatment, who stayed with me for several months and went back, so I had the chance to get to know her quite a bit more and her story and her family, and met her mother when we took her back. And you know, it's a story that's not unlike many of the other girls there. She's the first, she has 7 siblings, and she's the I think 5th of the 8 kids in the family, and she's the first to go to secondary school. And you know, her mom certainly never went to secondary school, never had that chance, and so for her family, this is, you know, a dream come true for them to have her there. And these girls are, you know, they're amazing. I mean, they're heroes. They're incredible because they work so hard and they're so incredibly dedicated to what they want to do for their country. Hearing them talk about their dreams and what they want to do is amazing.
Well, let's talk about a day in the life of a typical Rwandan 10th grader at Goshora Academy.
Yes, yes. Well, they wake up very early, and they get up at about 5:30 or 6 in the morning to start their day. Which
that's
is
really
early.
That's really mean.
It's very early, I know. And they go first and get ready for the day. Then they go to study hall, and they have about an hour in study hall, and then they go and have breakfast, and then they start their day in classes. They take a break for lunch and kind of the heat of the day, have some time off. We're a science and technology focused school, which again was something that we heard and tried to listen to from the Ministry of Education. That was really the focus that they had said was the greatest need in the vision that they have for their country. So these girls are focused on science and engineering, and many of them want to be doctors, and so they are in incredibly hard, difficult classes that, quite frankly, I look at the textbooks and could not sit in on it, probably any of their classes at this point. But,
what's the difference in a 10th grader here in the United States versus a 10th grade girl in Rwanda at the Goshora Academy?
Well, I think it's a little bit hard to tell or to compare, because it's all relative, and people's life experiences are so different. But I can tell you that from what I've seen, there is a commitment, there's an understanding there with not just the kids at our school. I would say this in general at the schools that I've visited, but I can certainly say it for our girls there. There's an understanding of what this opportunity means, and they take it quite seriously. They feel blessed to be getting an education, and they really understand that this is their chance. This is their opportunity to do something amazing with their life, for their family, what it will do for their siblings, for their community, and for their country.
That's really a part of what they're thinking at age 15 years old, 14, 15 years old. They're thinking,
which I think is a different. And so when you say what's the difference, I would say, and I don't say that trying to be critical of a student here. It's just a different life experience. But there really is that understanding. For example, the young woman that I mentioned who was here that wants to be a doctor, and she spoke very articulately about the fact that she wants to be a doctor in her country so that people in her country don't have to travel somewhere else to get medical care, that she wants to be able to provide care for people in her own country, and has that sense of, what can I do to help my country and to make it better.
You have 90 girls in your first class.
Yes.
How many of them do you expect to have graduate?
That is a very good question. I think we'll probably know more at the end of this year. I think
maybe a better question would be, what are the impediments to them graduating?
The impediments are, I would say, family challenges. We've had this year, which I don't know if it's atypical or just if it's the norm, I'm not sure, but we had, out of our 90 girls, we had 4 girls lose their fathers this year, for example, which to me seems like an extraordinarily high number.
Yeah.
And those sorts of challenges that present themselves in families and in lives that maybe require families to make different choices, move different areas, or something that would make.
Let's say that you have 90% graduation rate. What happens to them? What do they do? Where do they go?
Well, our hope is that, we really look at this school and the girls very much, which I think is the most important piece, is how do they see themselves, because in the end, to me, this is all about giving them their voice of what it means to them. But they see this, and we see this as a university preparation. They want to go on to university either in Rwanda, at one of the universities there in Rwanda, or at another wonderful university somewhere in Africa, East Africa, somewhere else in Africa, or maybe for the ones lucky enough to go and have the chance to study somewhere in the UK or the US, and then come back to their own country and live out their dreams. So,
how many teachers do you have?
We have currently 3 U.S. teachers. Our head of school is a U.S. head of school, a man named Peter Thorpe, who's an amazing educator from San Francisco. And then 3 U.S. teachers that have made a commitment to be there for 2 years. And really that was also part of our plan and our strategy to help build capacity with the local teachers and then be able to transition over at a certain point. So Peter, our head of school, knows part of his job is to hire his successor to take over. He will be there for 3 years. And we have currently 6 African teachers. And
so you have 9 teachers for 90 girls.
So we have 9 teachers for 90 girls.
Pretty good ratio.
Pretty good ratio, yeah. And some of those, we have a technology teacher. We have, all sorts of, we've really tried to do everything that we can within the limits of what we can do financially and all that to give them the best opportunities that we can.
You talked about sustainability a lot. How can you sustain the school? Or how can the school be sustained?
Right. Well, like I mentioned, we think of, to me, sustainability is, it's sort of a word that's thrown around a lot, but and it can mean lots of different things, but I sort of see it in 3 different ways. One is sustainability in our building, and we were lucky enough, again, with Mulvaney helping us to think, what can we do long-term to do things in the building that actually help to sustain the school? So things like rain catchment systems on the roof in a dry area, or conserving power, different things like that, green things that we can do for the building itself, which is really important. The other piece is the partnerships to make sure it's sustainable. And then really at the end of the day, sustainability is, can it be financially sustainable? And so one of the great, lucky pieces of serendipity that we had towards the beginning of this project was that we made a connection with Washington State University, which is one of the top agriculture schools in the country. And we had the great opportunity to talk to President Elson Floyd about our project and told him what we were trying to do and asked if there was any way that maybe we could partner and if Washington State might be interested in helping us to think through with this 26 acres of land that we have, about half of it for school or so, I guess, as it's turned out, half of it for agriculture. How can we grow things, do things on that land to generate income? Or grow things for the food that cuts into the operating budget. So we've been working with them for about 2 years and have our lead person from Washington State University, Dr. Ralph Kuhlman, who's been helping us to basically research and develop what is possible. And so I'm happy to say we had this year an incredible crop of the most amazing, when I was there in July, the most beautiful eggplant and onions and tomatoes and all sorts of things that are being used in the kitchen, which again is tremendously helpful for us in our budget. Food is nearly half of our operating budget. So.
And you know what? I've got about 1,000 questions left and about 5 seconds left to go. So Susie, thank you very much for being with us. RwandaGirlsInitiative.org. You're going to want to go there early and often. Take care.
Thank you.